The Tudor dynasty ruled England from 1485 until 1603. Their story encompasses some of the most dramatic and unforgettable events in European history. They remain the most famous and controversial of royal families. The dynasty started when Henry Tudor defeated Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth Field. This was the final stage of the Wars of Roses and made Henry VII the King of England. In this video, we will present about the profile of one of the most significant figures in the history of the British Kingdom, namely Henry Tudor, or commonly known as Henry VII. He was one of the king of the British Kingdom and had a variety of policies and a very critical role in the history of British society, and all of them will be briefly and densely defined in this short film. Henry VII was born to Lady Margaret Beaufort, Countess of Richmond at Pembroke Castle on 28 January 1457. 3 months before his childbirth, his dad, Edmund Tudor, 1st Earl of Richmond, died. Henry's paternal grandfather, Owen Tudor, originally from the Penminid Tudors on Wales Isle of Anglesey. He became a justice in King Heinrich V. After serving at the Battle of Agincourt, he became one of the guards for the king's body. The widow of Heinrich V, Catherine of Valois, is said to have secretly married Owen. Edmund, Henry's father, was one of their sons. In 1452, Edmund was called Earl of Richmond and the Parliament formally declared legitimate. Margaret Beaufort, the mother of Henry, is the offspring of the Lancastrian branch of the Plantagenet house. Henry's dad, Tudor Edmund, Richmond's first Earl, half-brother, England's Henry VI, and Penminid descendant Welsh Tudor, died about 3 months before Henry's son was born. His uncle, Henry VI, fought against Yorkian branch Edward of York in the early years, later known as King Edward IV. He was the last British king on the front line to win the crown. By marrying King Edward's daughter, Elizabeth of York, he improved his claim significantly to the throne. After the Civil War, Henry succeeded in restoring British monarchy control and prosperity. A number of administrative, economic, and diplomatic projects are attributed to him. His strategy to help the wool industry in Britain and his stall with the Netherlands has long-term advantages for the whole United Kingdom economy. He cared a lot about the specifics and focused on raising new sales instead of investing in new fortune. The new taxes would stabilize public revenues. The committee found systematic infringements of the tax collection process after its death. For almost 24 years, Henry ruled and his son Henry VIII happily succeeded. There are more reasons why Henry became the king. Henry Tudor spent 14 years in exile in Britain after Edward's throne in 1471. Having won the battle in Bosworth Field by Edward IV, Richard III, the culmination of the Wars of the Roses, he went on his way to the throne with the assistance from France, Scotland, and Wales. After defeating Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth, Henry then declared himself as the King of England, although his claim by blood was very weak. He was the grandson of Catherine of Valois, second marriage to Owen Tudor, in which her first marriage was to Henry V. This led to the birth of his father, Edmund Tudor. On the other hand, there is no evidence that Catherine and Owen had been married, so that made Henry's claim to the throne as a legitimate heir ever more tenuous.
In December 1483, Henry kept his vow to marry York's Elizabeth. They are third-party cousins, including John of Gaunt's 2 grandchildren. On 18 January 1486 in Westminster Abbey, Henry and Elizabeth married. The marriage sat together, warning home, and gave the kids a strong trumpet. His marriage with this wedding between the houses of York and Lancaster symbolizes the heraldic emblem of Rose of Tudor, a mixture of the white rose of the York and the red rose of the Lancaster. It would therefore create some potential debate as to whether the descendants from the fourth son of Edward III, Edmund, the Prince of York, have a superior on inferior right to the son of John, Gaunt, who took the throne through the marriage to Philippa, the successor to the second son Lionel, the dialect of Clarence, for 3 generations. 3 generations. On Christmas Day 1483 at Prince Cathedral, Henry vowed to marry York's oldest daughter of Edward IV, Elizabeth, who has been the successor of Edward's brothers, Prince of the Tower, King Edward V, and Richard Shrewsbury, the Duke of York, since her death was supposed to have happened. Henry was attempting to get land in England, with money and materials lent from his host Francis II, but his plot broke down, and Henry Stafford, 2nd Duke of Buckingham, his chief co-conspirator, was executed. Richard III, now with the assistance of Pierre Langley, Prime Minister of Francis II, was attempting to extradite Henry from Brittany, but Henry was fleeing to France. The French, who easily fed him with soldiers and supplies for the second attack, welcomed him. In the hope of uniting the Yorkist and Lancastrian sides of the Plantagenet dynasty conflicts, Henry married Elizabeth of York, and she was largely successful. However, there was already such a high degree of suspicion that anybody with blood relations, take John de la Pole and the Earl of Lincoln for an instance, was suspected to want the throne. Henry secured his courage mainly by splitting and weakening the nobility's control, primarily by actively using bonds and accepting allegiance. He also passed legislation on livery and protection, the tradition of aristocrats who had a vast number of followers wearing the insignia or uniforms of their masters, and creating future personal armies. Henry had the right to bear the royal arms of England as his successor. Henry used the red and white rose as his emblem after his marriage, and became known as the Rose Tudor. In order to establish his reign on the throne, Henry was king on 21st August 1485, on the day before Bosworth field, with the right of retroactive conquest. Anyone who vowed against him for Richard would be responsible for treason, and Henry, once reinstated, will legitimately take the land and property of Richard III. Henry saves Richard's nephew and appoints his successor, John de la Pole, Earl of Lincoln, and becomes the Salisbury Countess of York Margaret Plantagenet's Jure. He takes caution not to speak to baronage or summon the house until the coronation in Westminster Abbey, the 13th of October 1485. Henry issued an order after his coronation that any man who pledged allegiance to him would be protected on his property and in person, whatever he had done in the past. Henry asked the Parliament and his government to revoke the Titlus Regius law, which proclaimed the marriage of Edward IV to be unconstitutional, thereby legitimizing his wife. Henry demanded the Parliament. Amateur historians Bertram Fields and Sir Clements Markham claim to have been involved in the assassination of the princess in the castle, since the capture of Titlus Regius over the princess a better throne claim than his. However, Alison Wyre claimed that only Henry and his followers were confident that the princess were killed at the ring ceremony 2 years ago. The policy of Henry VII was peacekeeping and economic development. He had succeeded to some degree. Henry and Britain delegates signed the Treaty of Trident in February 1489. Under the terms of the deal, Henry sent 6,000 soldiers under the order of Lord Doughty to the battle at the expense of Brittany. The deal aims at avoiding the invasion of Brittany by France. The deal redefined Anglo-Briton relations according to John M. Current. Henry has begun a new strategy to regain Vienne and Plantagenet's lost claims in France. The compromise marked a change from neutrality to direct involvement over the French invasion of Britain.